Ooh, welcome to the Gambling Gauchos. I'm Rob Bro. He's Kyle Jacobson. He's Money Mainville. Coach Gass, 3-0 in the Big 12. Nothing else of note happened this weekend. How we doing, boys?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Yesterday was electric. Money. You wouldn't expect to win after a 20-0 run from the other team. How did it happen?
I think I'm still trying to figure out. Pretty impressive way to claw yourself out of a hole on a day where you're shooting like 5 for 20 from deep, which ironically this team has done a handful of times this season and has won every single game that they've shot about 20% from deep in. But I really thought Warren Washington helped swing kind of the momentum of the game in the early parts of the second half. I thought he played some huge minutes. And then obviously Joe Toussaint just kind of grinding you out a couple of extra possessions where I know he was having a tough day at the rim, getting a lot of contact, not drawing a lot of fouls. But I think this was a game where your most experienced players kind of showed up in a game where every minute mattered. And then I thought Darion Williams was excellent as well.
Kyle, we talked about this with Lawrence Odiase many moons ago. If you think back to the 2019 run, I'm just allow me to get there real quick. You had lost 4 in a row, I think, and you were playing West Virginia at home. Maybe it was the second game after the win streak started. Regardless, you're at home. You're in a tough spot. And Lawrence Odiase absolutely punks a guy under the basket and rips the ball away after the play had ended. Shades of that this weekend. Down. It's a rough point in the game. And Chance McMillan just picks up Tyler Perry's whole body with the ball. Now, I don't know who came up with it at the end, but it was a really tough play from Chance McMillan. You have to see that from your players. You have to see that. And then I truly believe what Kyle said after the game, what Coach Gass says all the time, and what Jerome Tang said after the game, the toughest team wins. You were just tougher than Kansas State for large stretches of that game and when it mattered. We talked about it at the end of the Kansas game against TCU. Hunter Dickerson slides his feet a little bit and gets that ball in. Joe Toussaint might have had a little bit of the same leeway, but hits his free throws and the game is over. Kyle, you talk about analytics and numbers quite a bit. Can you explain to me how one call at the end of a game isn't more important than the 100 calls that are made during the rest of the game?
I could, but I don't think I would convince any Kansas State fans, or at least most of them. There's a few that.
Shout out North.
Hey, there he is. Yeah, he had a funny tweet right after that Chance McMillan tie-up. He was like, basically, I'm not letting go of the ball. Like, the ref's going to have to come take it from me. Even after they blow the whistle, like, I'm not letting go. But, yeah, that replay was hilarious. I didn't catch that live, but Chance McMillan, like, basically picked up Tyler Perry off the ground and made him, like, waddle a little bit. I was like, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If this was your first Big 12 basketball game ever, you might have been shocked at what you saw. But the reality is over the course of 40 minutes, there are quite literally 100 calls or no calls that you could debate. And I get it. Like, it's maddening. And I've been watching college basketball games and thought to myself, this is such a bad product because of the officiating. I'm not going to watch it anymore. And, of course, I go back for more like a lamb being led to slaughter. So I get it. That was a key moment, and he traveled. They showed the replay. I turned to my wife, and I was like, he traveled. But also, like, Pop Isaacs took a charge that they called a block, and we got mugged under the basket 100 times with no call. So, yeah, he traveled, but also the refs didn't call a perfect game up to that point. So they were mostly, my sense as a Red Raider fan, so acknowledging some bias here, was that they were letting the guys play for 40 minutes. It wasn't a ticky-tacky game, a lot of contact. They seemingly tried to swallow the whistle if they could, and they did down the stretch as well. So you can blame incompetence if you want. If the game was rigged, I would love to know why the officials allowed a 20-0 run in an effort to try and get Texas Tech to win. I feel like they could have
Yeah.
cut that crap out a lot earlier before it got to 20-0. So it is what it is. We're going to get screwed on a call like that later in the year, I'm sure. We've gotten screwed on calls like that as recently as last season. Pop Isaacs got mugged against Kansas. We should have won that game and didn't. It's how it goes. I get the frustration in the moment because if they do call travel there, you likely don't win. But it's Big 12 basketball. It's college basketball. We could nitpick 100 of those plays if we wanted to pull the tape.
Yeah, and would you – let me ask you both this. Do you prefer that kind of game where they do swallow the whistle for the majority? There's not a lot of calls under the basket. You're letting them play. Or would you prefer a game that's called tight and you kind of get a lot of free throws and there's no rhythm to the game? Because I know what I like, and it's what played out this Saturday, win or lose.
I agree with you, and it can be frustrating when your guy's shooting a layup and you feel like he's getting mugged and there's no call. But like I said, they were consistent in my eye on both ends of the floor and for all 40 minutes. And to me, consistency is key. Like that's premium over calling it tight versus calling it loose. But yeah, we've also played games against West Virginia where they called 55 team fouls, and like that, it's unbearable to watch. It's more than a foul per minute. So I get it's not ideal, and you can nitpick a handful or dozens of calls / no calls. But to me, that's better than the game being interrupted over and over and over again.
Yeah, I like a physical Big 12 basketball game. Again, I mean, consistency is everything. If your guys are getting whacked and they're not calling it, but they're calling it on the other end, I think that's a different story. And I think that happens certain places more than others around this league. But I think when it's consistent, when it's even, you're letting them play. I like that style of Big 12 basketball game. And I think for Tech to win a game like that at this point in the season says a lot about kind of the identity of the team that they're finding. And they really are leaning into this toughest team wins. I mean, they want to play this fast-paced, explosive offense that really is generated by the perimeter. But this game was won by them being the tougher team, by getting those tie-ups on loose balls, by not giving Kansas State a huge advantage on the offensive rebounding. I think those were things that, coming into this game, you needed to see addressed, you needed to see leaned into a little bit more in this matchup. And they looked like a different team, but kind of what's been the story is, hey, they looked like a different team and they found a way to win once again.
Well, I think Tang meant it sarcastically in his post-game presser, but by the end of the game, you know how they're calling it, you know the deal. And he said something like, we'd only been to the free throw line 7 times, and so figured we probably weren't going to go to the free throw line. And it's like, yeah, and you can gripe about that and argue maybe you should have gotten more calls earlier in the game. But again, if the refs are calling it consistently, they're probably not going to give you a call. You're going to have to really earn it. And so as long as both teams know the deal and it's consistent, we can gripe about it as fans, but to me, that's all you can ask.
And it didn't make any sense to me in that moment, in that game, to draw up the foul play. Like, hey, we're going to get a call here. Tyler Perry, go to the rim. Especially when he shot so well from outside, even at the line and behind for the rest of the game. I know he's a streaky shooter, always has been. Was certainly streaky on Saturday, but Kansas State is going to beat some teams in the Big 12. They're good again, but to me, it was a little bit of a coaching malpractice there at the end to call that play in that moment, or at least have that on your mind. I don't know if it was technically a foul play, but that's what Tang said in the post game. One question here, a lot thoughts on the lack of technicals on Kansas State. Tang ran onto the court. Have y'all seen Shaka Smart coach this year? There was one possession they showed. He was playing defense on the floor. He stopped a guy from going to the corner. That guy is always on the floor. Jamie Dixon's big old size 16 boots are always on the court. He gave Kevin McCullough a twisted ankle back in the day. They don't call that very often. Gas is on the floor sometimes. But there was a technical on the guy who hung on the rim. they missed it on the broadcast, but it was a double technical on him and Warren Washington that they did call. That's why it looked like a no call because they were both called. That should have been a one-way technical, in my opinion. He teabagged Warren Washington, and Warren Washington responded. But I don't know. That seemed pretty obvious to me.
My understanding or my interpretation of that sequence was that they called offsetting techs based on the trash talk after he got done hanging on the rim. So I still think that they got away with one there.
Yeah, that's what I think. And if it was the hanging on the rim and then the response, and that was the two technicals, or if it was completely after the play, it was still a no call basically at the end. Warren Washington, though, was huge in the second half, I thought, from the middle of the paint, doing those sky hooks that I'm begging him to stop. But if he's hitting them like this, you can't stop. You have to do that. If that's in his bag consistently, that is big for him. Speaking of bags, the biggest play of the game, in my opinion, besides maybe the free throws from Joe Toussaint, was the 2 or 3 offensive rebounds there right under the basket, and then Lamar Washington going up and under to get that ball in. Wow, that was something we have not seen from him. His only 2 points in the game, but if we're looking at one basket or one call is the huge difference, then that was the difference in the game, in my opinion. And speaking again of toughest team wins, that was a tough-ass play.
Yeah, that was tough. He started that sequence. This is I would say, average-sized guard who, of the guys who play minutes for us, plays the fewest minutes. Their starting big man gets the board. He rips it from him, passes the ball. We get another shot. He's 30 feet from the rim when the second shot in that sequence is taken, and he splits 2 would-be Kansas State rebounders, gets his second offensive board of that sequence, puts it back in and finishes, like you said, Rob. I think he only played 6 or 8 minutes, if that, but that was a loud sequence, and Kansas State, to their credit, even when we had momentum plays like that, kind of kept you at arm's length. Like you cut it to 5, and then they would get it back to 7. But in a one-point game, every single play like that matters. If he doesn't pull down either of those boards or he doesn't finish that shot, you probably still don't win the game. And kind of incredible that, I don't know, that was such a loud play or sequence of plays, and then I don't think he got inserted back into the game after that. But I think that's exactly the kind of play McCasland wants, and hopefully he earned himself more minutes moving forward and kind of earned more trust. Because I think those are exactly the kind of plays that they were talking about before, I think, the Oklahoma State game. We said, like, we're just not tough enough going after the ball on rebounds, loose balls. Like, I need guys that are willing to scratch and claw to get an extra possession for us. And Lamar Washington in that moment was doing everything he could. And so I think he might have earned himself. It didn't play out that way at the end of that game, but I think going into Big 12 play, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that was kind of a catalyst for more minutes for him.
We kind of do this all the time. Put current players into kind of roles of previous players here at Texas Tech and kind of say, hey, if you could be that guy, or he's a lot like that guy. And that's kind of our frame of reference. But if Lamar Washington can be a Justin Gray type and kind of have a mysterious box score, but be really competitive and get a couple of boards and one big shot, and you look at the box score of Justin Gray quite a bit in those early years in the Tubby era and the Chris Beard era, and say, what did he do? And then if you watch the game, you're like, wow, that's a kind of an empty box score, but he was really, really important to that win. I don't know if he's the same kind of athletic scorer that Justin Gray was, but.
Yeah, and I think with his defense too, almost gives you kind of like a Clarence Nadolny spike. I don't think as much energy on the defensive end. I think he's got better hands even, and then a little bit of a deeper offensive game. But I think you're kind of looking for another option coming off your bench just to give you some juice, give you some minutes, because obviously this team is loaded at guard. But I thought outside of him, another huge play was Darion Williams, and one after Warren Washington's missed free throw. He was everywhere in this game. Thought McCasland had an awesome quote on him post-game. We were talking about it a little bit last week about, hey, it seems like he coaches Williams the hardest. There seems to be a lot of conversations between those two. after the game, he said exactly that. He was like, yeah, ask anybody on the team who I'm hardest on, they'll say D5. And it just still feels like we're kind of scratching the surface on what he can be, just because of how versatile he is. I mean, there's no level of the court that you don't feel comfortable with him at. It's just really, really rare to see at his size with his versatility. I think they're just trying to figure out a way to get him to make that consistent across the board impact every game. And right now, he is falling into that role really, really well.
Elsewhere in the Big 12, we'll keep talking about this game for sure before we finish out on it. But elsewhere in the Big 12, more wild finishes. Any other games you want to point out in the Big 12 before we wrap up this weekend in the conference? I know that BYU game, a lot of people were looking at with UCF, Kansas, Houston, all kind of showing themselves, in my opinion, this weekend again.
I think Cincinnati's a lot better than their 1-2 Big 12 record. And I don't think their schedule gets a lot easier in the next handful of games, but I think they're legit. And TCU, we bought stock early on. They beat KenPom and net number 1 Houston in a close game at home. I have no idea how, I don't know, their kind of tournament profile hasn't caught up to some of these analytics and metrics. They're like a KenPom top 25-ish team right now, and I think Lenardi still has them outside looking in. Probably not after the win over Houston. But I don't know. I feel like TCU has been this top 30-ish team for a long time in my eyes. People are still treating them like, I don't know, they might be the 10th best team in the Big 12 or something. Those are the only ones really. I think, I guess the last one I would say, worst team in the conference is still West Virginia, but you still have to go to Morgantown to play those guys, and they don't make it easy even when they're not very good. I don't think Texas is very good either, but a lot of teams roughly as good as Texas are going to go to Morgantown and lose, and I think they'll find a way to still win, I don't know, a handful of games in Morgantown this year against tournament caliber teams.
Yeah, you could see a West Virginia type season that is 5-13. I mean, they can win 5 games at home in the Big 12 like Texas Tech did last year. They might even steal one on the road. Every team, I think, in the Big 12 is going to be on the bubble, midway through the Big 12 season. I don't think anybody's going to get run off the floor. Everybody's going to have some Big 12 wins. Nobody's going to go winless. If there are only 2 teams right now that are undefeated, who's the best 1 and 2 team? Houston, probably. But they could be 1-3 this week. Who knows? With Texas Tech 3-0, and who else is 3-0? Baylor. Baylor's 3-0. So if you're power ranking the Big 12, it's hard to not say Baylor's number 1. Houston and Kansas still up there. But I think you might start looking at Texas Tech as, top 5 in the Big 12. Is that too soon? Have they played some weaker teams? What are you looking at for Texas Tech right now, Money?
I think top 5 is definitely fair. I think you've got to have Baylor in there. I think right now, Iowa State still kind of feels like they're flying under the radar. I think it might be because Houston lost again. And so maybe, the idea is, maybe Houston's not as good as we thought they were. But Iowa State's defense right now, number 2 in KenPom, and they've got some scores. They are playing good enough offensive basketball to be a really, really scary team. And so I think Texas Tech, Baylor, Iowa State, and then maybe Kansas, Houston as your top 5, maybe a TCU over Houston, at least for right now. But again, just an absolute gauntlet. Just when you think, there couldn't be more parity, more, elite competition night in and night out, it ends up happening once again. And it's just a gauntlet. Like you're looking at a 4-game stretch where you're playing like top 30 KenPom teams back to back to back to back. It's unreal, the grind of this league.
And 3 of those are on the road.
Are you ranked for that matchup against Houston?
I was going to say, let's do a quick over-under, 22nd and a half in the AP poll. Higher or lower?
If you look at the teams that lost this week, there's going to be a ton of movement. Texas will drop out. I would probably take the over but I think you will be ranked. I think a jump to 21 would be, or 22 would be pretty big from unranked. But enough teams lost. There's going to be a lot of movement, and maybe more teams enter that weren't there than just Texas Tech. If one or two in the top 25 lost, they're in that 20 to 25 range, maybe a jump up further. But as many teams lost, you're also going to have teams moving back, and maybe a more reshuffling than anything in the top 25. Does that make sense?
I'll call my shot and say 25 on the dot.
I like that. I think that's what I think. 23 to 25 probably feels safe. You didn't take any huge jumps in Kim Pom and in net. I actually think you went down in net somehow because Big 12 and just college basketball in general. But I feel like that late 20s range feels pretty safe.
And Houston will be when they play 6th, 7th. How far are they dropping from 2 with 2 Big 12 losses?
I don't know. It feels like they should drop out of the top 10. If I were a voter, I would say
But everyone lost.
That's true. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't paid enough attention to kind of know how I would vote on that.
I want to see if I can find – somebody tweeted how many teams lost this week. I'm going to go look for that as you guys discuss.
I think probably around 8 or 9. They're still first in Kim Pom. Their 2 losses, even though, they have lost 2 now, are still among the fewest in college basketball, especially at this level. I think they lost again to a really respectable Iowa State team, a really respectable TCU team. And so I feel like closer to that 8, 9, 10, probably about right.
It's always ranked to number 1, though? That would be Rino BBQ out in Olton, Texas. You can throw out Ken Pom, you can throw out Net. Folks, this is the number 1 barbecue joint in all of West Texas and therefore the entire world. Give them a follow on social at Rino BBQ. Order ahead online, RinoBBQ.com, to make sure your food is there when you arrive. They've also got the mobile food truck going all across West Texas. Give them a shout. Give them a try if you haven't already. If you haven't and you listen to this podcast, I don't know what you're doing. Like we've told you a million times to go to Rino. Everybody who's gone sends us rave reviews, so you're missing out. Tell them the Gambling Gaucho sent you. Give them a fist bump. Shout out to Rino BBQ.
All right, final thoughts on this Texas Tech, Kansas State victory. I will say this. The fan interaction from Kansas State after the game. I love Kansas State. Hey, look, I wear this hat with pride. EMA, unless we're playing. But if we were power ranking Big 12 fan bases that the Gauchos like, I think the Kansas State Wildcats have dropped a point or two. Maybe I might move up Iowa State to number 1 now. I know that's Farmageddon blasphemy, but man, Kansas State, that one guy who would not leave the mentions, might have ruined it for the entire fan base. That guy was just coping hard with one call. Now, one of us was going back and forth with him quite a bit, but I will say this. I think they might drop. They're not going to drop out of the top 5, but man, that was a rough sequence there from Kurtz and the boys there with the Wildcats.
Trending down, and you hate to see it.
I hate to see it. We love Kansas State. I can't say that enough.
A couple interactions that really, hey, fans are fans, close game, bad call at the end. There's sort of a baseline of expectation there. But the guy writing us paragraphs about how, he will not rest until we lose, and then he can rub our noses in it, as if we're all under the impression that we're about to go 18-0 in Big 12 plays.
No.
Okay, man, if that floats your boat, I'm not going to see it because we muted you. But if you want to yell into the void, by all means. The other one that I thought was funny, and I didn't poke the bear on this one, but he was like, saying the refs rigged it. And I was like, well, he said it was gift wrapped. I think the refs gift wrapped us a game. And I said, was the 20-0 run part of the gift wrapping? And he was like, you're doing the same kind of gaslighting the KU fans do after we play them. And it's getting to the point like, okay, if more than one fan base, if you're having this same conversation after a loss with more than one fan base, maybe you're the common denominator and not the opponent. I didn't say that to him, but it's worth thinking about, you know?
I also did have a good chuckle, which I needed this weekend. I didn't know how bad I needed it until this afternoon, but I had a good chuckle at the Kansas Rock Chalk blog that tweeted after and I'll say it, I'll name them. They said something about, oh man, that Lubbock crazy environment. They get all the calls. Hilarious. Ironic. They can't see 2 feet in front of their own faces on that one. Maybe it's because it's snowy in Kansas and Missouri, but good grief. From someone who gets all the calls at Allen Fieldhouse, that is funny. I will say, though, the USA is back.
USA is back. I wish the ESPN TV mics would do it justice. And I'll say this about Iowa State fans, since we're on this topic of how much we like everybody else in the conference, and I'm fine to go on with this as long as y'all want, or we can move on. We've leaned into the Matt Campbell, a candidate for every job bit, pretty hard.
Yeah.
80% of them, I think, handle it well. They think it's a funny joke. This poor lady, though, I'm guessing old enough to be like one of our parents. She hits the reply button and says, "I can't stand you." I was like, that's okay. I would be annoyed too if I were you.
Yeah.
But we still love Cyclone Nation.
Can I explain the joke there?
Sure.
He's never left. He's been a candidate for 100 jobs and has never left. That's the joke. He's not going to leave.
I think that's what people miss. We're not making fun of Matt Campbell. We're making fun of the media tying him to a million jobs and him never going anywhere.
I always want to hit him with the that's the joke meme from The Simpsons, the stand-up comedian. It's the joke.
Well, and there are always, like, there are more serious job openings. Like when Michigan State came open, I was like, that would actually be a good fit. He would get to go to the Power 2. He's a Midwest guy. Like, that might be the kind of job he's waiting for. But then you post him in, like, Dallas Cowboys garb, and people are like, that will never happen. It's like, I know. It's a joke.
What's funny is that was a hilarious bit for Chris Beard, too. After he left for Texas, every single job opening, no matter what it was, Chris Beard to the Hornets, Chris Beard to the Pelicans, Chris Beard to wherever else. Now, that one died out. I got kind of tired of the Chris Beard bit, but this one will never die. I think Matt Campbell will be tied to every job from now on.
Well, that's what John Kurt said. He was like, I kind of hope he never leaves at this point, just so this bit can go on forever. But overall, I think Cyclone fans handle that bit really well. And, West Virginia, we developed a soft spot for them last March Madness. There was this thing out there when they lost an ugly game that they should have won against Maryland, that there was this Gauchos curse. And I was like, yeah, right. And then Huggy goes off the deep end, and they're terrible. And now I'm kind of worried we might have jinxed him forever.
I'd hate that. I would hate to have a hand in jinxing the Mountaineers. I would hate that.
I retract that because I said Garrett Green was going to be a dude in the offseason, and they won 9 games, and he's one of the better returning quarterbacks in this league. So I'm calling off the Gauchos curse. I'm saying that's not real.
Money, do you have any final thoughts on the basketball game specifically, or the fan bases? Because we have some college football to talk about as well tonight.
Yeah, I think Kansas State is really close to being a good basketball team in this league. I really do think it's going to come down to if they can protect the basketball, which I think is going to be an uphill battle with their guards, but it's going to have to happen if they want to win Big 12 basketball games. And then they've just got to shoot the ball at a more consistent level. It's been a massive, massive crutch for them this season. But, I mean, Tyler Perry kind of gave you a glimpse of their ceiling in the midst of that 20-0 run. Like when this team is making shots, they're really, really, really dangerous. And it feels like they may be a team that kind of hangs around with one of the teams in the conference that's really trying to, just kind of make the game a defensive battle. Like maybe like a TCU or even an Iowa State who has a good defense, but maybe not the caliber of a shooting team as Kansas State. Those feel like they might be sneaky games for them, but really do think it's just about cleaning up their guard play. I think they've got to take a lot better care of the basketball, whether that's just getting better quality shots or just not turning the ball over. But they've got 2 good guards. They've just got to clean it up and play smarter basketball. But when they do, they're going to be a tough out for anybody in this conference. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think if you kind of shoved some square pegs into round holes here, or however that phrase goes, and you said there was 3 tiers in the Big 12, 4, 5, 5. They would be in that second tier with Texas Tech, just on the bottom end of it. I think Kansas State, Iowa State, those kind of teams are right there punching up at the top 4 teams. Now, is Houston still one of those top 4 teams? Is there some room for movement there? Kansas, obviously a top 4 team, but has struggled in 2 games. Probably should have been 0-2 to start the Big 12 play after that TCU game. And then TCU, they're probably 4 right now, but punching up at 3 or 2 now, I think. So we'll keep trying to do it. We'll keep trying to power rank this Big 12 slate. Maybe we'll do it a little more crisply after we get a couple of weeks in. But look, the Big 12 is a gauntlet. I still think Texas Tech is going to go, 10-8, 11-7, and you're 3-0. So there's some movement here and room for a couple of losses in a row as you go.
Yeah, the Frogs, had they not gotten jobbed at the Fog, we'd be talking about them as, legitimate Big 12 title contenders. A couple final thoughts on the Kansas State game. I think the way the game played out and the final sequence at the end lent itself to some fans being upset. But you can imagine how emotional it was in that locker room. You've got a coach in Jerome Tang who very clearly wanted to come to Lubbock last offseason. And we found our guy, Grant McCaslin, and said, no, thank you, Jerome Tang. And you've got a guy like Tyler Perry. And we said, nope, we'd rather roll with Joe Toussaint and Pop Isaacs. They had a shot. This was their Super Bowl, potential revenge game for a couple of guys that, just weren't going to cut the mustard in Lubbock. And they were this close to proving us wrong. But I think in the end, we got the right head coach and the right point guard. So, but the game itself unfolded about as badly as it could in many respects for Texas Tech. I think 5 of 25 from 3. I don't want to misspeak here. I think Toussaint and Isaacs were something like 6 for 24 combined. 24 shots. I think we only put up 50-something in the game. So they had almost half our shots, and they were shooting really poorly. You never want to put this out there and have fate prove you wrong, but it's hard to imagine us kind of shooting a lot worse than that. Now, you're also not going to hold your opponent to 59 a lot of nights. But I've talked about this. It's like, oh, yeah, there's going to be some game where you shoot 20% and get blown out. And this game, you shoot 20% from 3 and find a way to win. And I'm also not sure how to view that 7-minute stretch where they go 20-0 on you. Like, do you say, oh, well, 33 minutes out of 40, we outplayed them by 21, and you hang your hat on that? Or is that so worrisome that a 7-minute run turned out that terribly for you? I don't know. Probably a little bit of reason on both sides of that. We have a comment. I thought he said no to us. I mean, surely not, right? We could have taken Jerome Tang if we wanted to. Look, has Grant McCaslin ever lost in the Elite Eight of the NCAA tournament? No, he has not. How many NIT titles does Jerome Tang have, or CBI titles? So we got our guy. I think that's my final thoughts. That the guards, like Chance McMillan, kind of an off game from outside. Well, he just found a way to get it done, and it was hideous. When the game ended, I turned to my wife. I was like, I don't know how we won that game. But you come out on the short end of so many of those in Big 12 play, and you think, oh God, like 2 of those going the other way, and like we're a tournament team instead of playing in the NIT or whatever. This one, it went your way, and you alluded to it. Going 3-0 gives you some margin for error going forward, because you're going to need it. Like these next 4, I would say if you can go 1-3, if you can go 2-2, that'd be like an absolute coup. 1-3, you're still in good shape. But yeah, there's going to be stretches in Big 12 play where it's not pretty, and you're going to look back and go, thank goodness we started 3-0 instead of 1-2 or something. Yeah. So I think that's my final thought on the game.
Even look, I hate that I'm going back to this again, but even in 2019, you were 4-0, and then you were 500 after 8 games of Big 12 play. So I mean, it's going to happen. There are going to be stretches in this Big 12 season where you have to make comebacks, not only in game like you did this weekend, but after stretches of losses. Hopefully they're on the road and you're not losing games at home, but you're going to lose probably one or two at home as well. All right. I do want to say one more thing about the game before we move on. At no point did I think Texas Tech would win that game after that 20-point run, even when Tyler Perry missed that shot because the clock operator did not start the clock. You're at home. Start the clock.
I am going to venture a guess that it was not operator error because the clock screwed up during the timeout. You remember that? The 7 seconds ran off during the timeout.
Yeah.
So I think the operator was probably doing all he or she could, and the system itself was screwed up. But I will say this. I'll acknowledge we got a little lucky that game. I think we were also tougher and earned the win, but we also got lucky. Kind of a cool shot to see the final moments, like the team celebrating after that last stop and seeing 7.7 on the game clock and 7 on the shot clock. 777s, usually a sign of good luck, and so we needed it. So shout out to the clock operator for keeping the 777s up during that last sequence because we could use it.
Shout out. I was very happy when the officials went and counted to 8 and waved it off because if you had an inbound, you probably lose. I mean, it just was that kind of game.
I was fully prepped for them to go, we're just going to redo that whole sequence, 7.7, like you get to inbound it again. And I was like, we are going to lose on some absolute bull crap right now.
Yeah.
And then they just said game over. I was like, okay. I didn't see y'all count it off. I don't know if 8 seconds went off, but I'll take it.
Also, watching at home on the television, thoughts on King McClure. I think he does a pretty good job. There were times in that game where I'm frustrated with him and the play-by-play guy, but overall, shout out to King McClure. I think he does a good job with Big 12 games, played at Baylor, knows the league, has been there. Him and Fran do a ton of Big 12 games. I think they're probably the two best in the Big 12. I know a lot of people have negative thoughts on Fran as well. Me and Fran have our own history. He owes me a pizza, but we'll move on from that. That's one of Ryan Hyatt's favorite bits.
Yeah, I think he was also the right guy for the game because it was 2 of his former assistant coaches. And so you said, like, he can speak to all these different Big 12 road environments because he's played in all of them. But then having also played under both Tang and McCasland was, I think, offered some pretty unique perspective there. So I enjoyed having him on the call.
All right. Since we last recorded, we can move on from basketball, yes? Are you two ready for that? All right. Since we last recorded, Kalen DeBoer goes to Alabama. I believe we recorded after Saban left, yes? Did we get to talk about that? I think so. So Saban leaves, retires. DeBoer to Alabama. I think he was their second or third choice. I do believe that Dan Lanning was choice number 1. I think they tried to get Sark, and then they land on DeBoer. Good hire, in my opinion. After that, I don't know if we said it on this show. I certainly said it on the Rob Bro show, and we said it in the Discord, especially with Sheer talking about it on Twitter. Jed Fish was the obvious. Some things have come out in the last couple hours, though. Arizona not happy with how that went down. Let's talk about it because Arizona now a Big 12 football team. Arizona is poor. Could not counter at all with Washington. They are a poverty school. The school could not even get it in their mind that they need to keep Jed Fish. Jed Fish leaves, has a 3-minute team meeting with his team. It took me longer to read his going away post than it did for him to tell his team he was leaving. Does Fafita follow him to Arizona or to Washington? Does the leading receiver there who is all in with Fafita, or do they feel burned and stick it out with the new Arizona coach? And then my last question here, I'm going to ask you 16 questions and turn it over to you two guys. Who is the next coach at Arizona? And why is it Matt Wells? Money?
It's a messy situation. On top of everything, the UW there's a comment joking about the meeting at a McDonald's. No, they actually met at his house, which is clearly in Tucson still, signed the contract in his very Arizona-looking house. And then the Washington AD posted it on Twitter, and you can see at the beginning of the video, there's still like an Arizona football yard sign that's up. The AD rings the doorbell, walks in, they sign a contract. I would be steaming. I know it's a rough way to go and to lose a coach, to kind of have it feel like the rug's been pulled out from under you. But I have no idea where Arizona goes from here on top of all the momentum that they had going for them last year. But what a roller coaster of a way to make that exit. That's for sure.
When it comes to Cliff Kingsbury's agent, fool me 12 times, shame on me, but does he still own real estate in the Tucson-ish area? And does he actually want to get back into college coaching? Probably not. Like, everything in my mind tells me no. But I think, like, if he was interested and his agent reached out to Arizona and said, like, hey, he wants back, he'll recruit this time, he'll try. I don't know. Like, I've heard crazier things. I think their offensive coordinator could pull a Mark Adams and say, I'm not going with you to UW. Brendan Carroll. So I don't know.
I feel like Arizona is the type of job to go hire a coordinator from somewhere. I don't think they're in a position monetarily to go steal a head coach, unless they do steal a head coach from a Group of 5 program. I don't think you're going to have the Lance Leipold, Matt Campbell. I know you tweeted that, but I don't think any of those guys leave a Big 12 team to go to another Big 12 team. But I will say this on Cliff Kingsbury's behalf: college football is a different world than when he was here 5 years ago. You don't have to be the head coach and be the lead recruiter anymore. And Texas Tech's recruiting prowess when Cliff Kingsbury was in Lubbock was at the bottom of the Big 12. The infrastructure sucked. They had one recruiting guy in the office. He can go hire a GM like James Blanchard and say, hey, you are the recruiter. Hire you a 6-person recruiting staff. Now, maybe Arizona doesn't have that budget, so Arizona's not a good fit for Cliff Kingsbury. But you live in a world of college football now where you don't have to recruit like you used to. Cliff could pull a Dion and just go sign a bunch of guys in the transfer portal who want to play for his offense, and you don't have to be a great high school recruiter anymore.
And they wouldn't really have to pay him because the Cardinals would be.
Yeah, maybe he likes Arizona. I don't know that Cliff is in the mix here, but I do think that Cliff makes more college sense today than he did 5-6 years ago when he was at Texas Tech. What was that, 2018 to 2024? I think that's a big enough a gap in college football where you don't have to recruit. And again, to be a head coach, like Joey McGuire is obviously involved in recruiting. But this recruiting GM or whatever else world that we live in, you could just say, hey, you make all the offers. I'll close if I need to, but you are the recruiters, and I'm going to go watch film and figure it out from there.
Yeah, I was just making that up with Cliff. I saw John Wilner, who's obviously pretty plugged in out there, float the San Jose State head coach. I don't know if I would hire this guy. I would probably interview Air Force's head coach. The military academy guys almost never get a Power 5 look, but they've been really good. I don't know. I think you always kind of start with somebody semi-regional. And then I threw this in the Discord. I don't think he would be a candidate, but it would kind of make sense if Tim DeRuyter got a call. He's spent most of his career in what is now the combined Pac-12, Big 12 footprint. I think he started at Air Force. He's been at Fresno. He's been at Cal. He's been at Oregon. He's now been at Texas Tech, Texas A&M. I think a guy who could step into Arizona and have familiarity with the footprints they typically recruit, which I think is mostly California, Arizona, and Texas. Probably not a sexy hire if you're Arizona, and I don't know if he wants to be a head coach again, But I think if they are looking for an existing Power 5 coordinator that makes some regional sense, I think they could do a lot worse than Tim DeRuyter.
Yeah, and my question with these new Big 12 teams, you had Colorado and Nebraska in the Big 12, right? And they had Texas pipelines. Colorado leaves, Nebraska leaves, they lose their Texas pipelines. Colorado coming back. Now, he recruits nationally, Coach Prime, so I don't know how much it matters, especially when he's not recruiting high school at all. But when you look at Arizona and Arizona State, how much of a Texas tie-in do they want? Do they go after a guy who has Texas ties because they want to start looking more east in recruiting rather than west? It's weird to say that with Texas, but it could be. And maybe they continue and go to a Fresno State coach or a San Diego State coach or the UNLV offensive coordinator who got some looks. Maybe that's what they take a stab at, but I don't know. And again, with Arizona's money troubles, just as a school, that they didn't try to keep Jed Fish, it seems like, and just said, oh, Washington's after him, cut our losses. I just don't see how Arizona goes and gets a big name hire. I do like that question from Mark, if you want to talk about that, Kyle.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that. I'm curious y'all's thoughts. I'm pretty opinionated on this, but Mark said, is the Big 12 going to be a coach stepping stone for the Big 10 and SEC? My thought on that is not any more than it already was. And what I mean by that is the thing about the names that were floated for this Washington job. It was Lance Leipold at Kansas, Matt Campbell at Iowa State, Chris Kleiman at Kansas State, and Jed Fish at Arizona. Those were kind of the four main ones that we knew of. Even in the old Power 5 dynamic, when I would say the Pac-12 was equal with the Big 12 perception-wise and all that, Washington – and programs like Washington, like let's say Oregon and Penn State, Wisconsin, like programs kind of in that same tier or threshold, they can already go hire Iowa State and Arizona's coach if they want to, assuming the other party is interested. So if this Power 2 thing had never happened and Jed Fish had the same success he had at Arizona, he can leave within the same conference and still go to Washington within the Pac-12. I think I'll only be concerned about that dynamic when like the South Carolinas of the world and the Purdue's of the world, like these mid to lower half Power 2 schools, if they can come take away like a Big 12 championship caliber coach like a Chris Kleiman, that would concern me. You'd be like, okay, arguably the best coach in our conference is signing up to go be 10th place in their conference. But by all accounts, guys like Leipold and Kleiman and Campbell have turned down Michigan State, Washington type jobs multiple times. The Blue Bloods are always going to be able to poach a school like that. Like if Michigan comes open and they want Matt Campbell, he's probably going to go for a job like that. But he's proven time and time again he won't go for a Michigan State kind of job. So, again, if it gets to the point where – I also don't want to overstate Jed Fish's success at Arizona. He certainly had to go in the right direction, but they finished this year as Alamo Bowl champions. If he was back-to-back, Pac-12 champs – and he left for Vanderbilt, then it'd be a little bit worrying. But he's upgrading programs, period, no matter what conference Washington or Arizona are in. So I don't view this as a symptom of that dynamic coming to fruition. And again, even if Kleiman or Leipold leave for a bigger and better program, they probably would have even before this Power 2 dynamic ever emerged. Like Texas has stolen your coach twice, once in the Southwest Conference when it was David McWilliams in football, and once when we were all still in the Big 12 in basketball when they took Chris Beard. We can talk about like whether that was a wise move for Chris Beard or not, but a program like Texas can very often poach from a program like Texas Tech if they want to. And so I don't see that changing just because they're consolidating in the same conference with each other. It'll only concern me if a program I view as like roughly on par starts taking really good coaches from the Big 12.
I talk about this all the time when we start talking about TV money and athletic budgets. On the field, a certain amount of money is a certain amount of money. Just because you have a bunch of money doesn't mean Rutgers is going to be better than Texas Tech in football. Athletic budgets be damned, TV money be damned. Rutgers is going to be Rutgers, Texas Tech is going to be Texas Tech. But Rutgers and Northwestern and Vanderbilt and Mississippi State are now going to have the money to maybe throw at a head coach, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to pay or want to pay $6-7 million just to steal a Joey Maguire or a Chris Kleiman. Washington, Michigan, let's say Penn State, maybe Alabama, LSU. Those schools have always been able to and will always be able to take your coach if they want to. Not because they have more money and the power to, but because for the history of football, they've been the premier programs. If Notre Dame came open tomorrow and called Matt Campbell first, Matt Campbell would go to Notre Dame, I think. And that's been a job he's been tied to in the past. But I think that's just the heritage, not the money, in my opinion.
You know, I've flip-flopped on John Wilner a couple times. When he broke the news of USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten, I was like, okay, this guy's plugged in. He had it first. He's legit. And then he kind of does the Canzano act of just being intentionally condescending. Then he came on our podcast, and I was like, okay, this guy's an okay dude. And then today he had an intentionally condescending tweet about – forget how he worded it, but basically like, this is a no-brainer for Jedd Fisch. Why in the world would you stay in the Big 12 when you could go to Washington? It's like, well, the same reason Lance Leipold would stay in the Big 12 instead of go to Washington. I mean, based on all the reporting out there, they wanted Leipold more than they wanted Fisch. And sure, Washington can pay more than Kansas or Arizona, but a guy like Leipold, and John Wilner made this point on our podcast. He was like, look at the path to the playoff, guys. You can be Washington in the new Big Ten and scratch and claw for 6th place, or you can be Kansas football, like 3 years removed from being the doormat of the sport, and be one of the front runners to get the auto bid from the Big 12. Not everybody wants necessarily the most prestigious job. When you have a pretty clear path to the playoff in the new Big 12 and the new playoff format, like they're giving Leipold a new stadium. He could probably snap his fingers and get whatever he wants at Kansas, or he can go to UW, try to follow a guy who just made the Natty there and probably get canned in 3 years when they don't win the Big Ten. Like, I'm not saying either one is right or wrong, and people have different aspirations and goals for their careers. But this idea, like, why would anybody stay here when they could go there? It's like, I mean, it's not that far-fetched in my mind. Dabo could probably go to the SEC if he wanted to, but he's built something at Clemson. He would rather stay there. I don't know if he could have gotten the Alabama job. It's like, yeah, you can go be Mark Stoops at Kentucky and never win a damn thing, and they'll pay you handsomely for it, and you'll have job security. Or you can be a Coach Kleiman in the Big 12, win your conference, go to the playoff, play in a New Year's Six type bowl, maybe for a little less money, but honestly, they can probably afford to pay up to a certain amount. I mean, if somebody wanted to come money whip Kleiman for $15 million a year, sure, I bet Kansas State probably couldn't match that, but like, I'm sure they would pay him $8 million, $9 million if they had to. So this idea that like there's absolutely no reason to stay at any of these schools if you're wanted by a Power 2 is nonsense to me. Again, if the top blue bloods want you, sure, go. But like, hey, I can compete for playoffs at Kansas State, or I can go get my ass kicked at Michigan State. To me, it's worth considering.
Yeah, and I again, you if you would have told me Leipold and Fisch were the top 2 candidates, and I thought they were on Friday, it is obvious that Fisch was the answer. Fisch has never been anywhere more than 2 years. You look at his Wikipedia page and his resume, it's NFL team 1 year, college team 2 years, NFL team 2 years, college team 1 year, back to the NFL, back to college, back to the NFL, back to the NFL, 1 year, 2 years, 1 year, 2 years. He's moving around. He wants to be at the next place. And Lance Leipold grinded, and then he grinded at Buffalo, and now he's grinding at Kansas. It just seems like he's the kind of guy that wants to stay in one place. Is the Big 12 going to be a stepping stone? Sure. But isn't the SEC, the bottom half of the SEC, a stepping stone for the top half? Didn't Dan Mullen, the best coach in Mississippi State history, leave for a job in the SEC because it was the top half of the SEC? Like, that's just how it goes.
Yeah, if Ohio State ever wants Indiana's head coach, they're going to have him.
Yeah. So
if Washington ever wants Arizona's coach, they're going to have him.
I mean, the short answer to Mark is yes. Yes, the Big 12 is going to be a stepping stone. but only in jobs that make sense. Rutgers is not going to come poach Kleiman just because they have money. It has to make sense. And I don't think that would make sense. Do you want to throw out a guess for Arizona? Have you seen a name besides the San Diego State head coach Money? Do you have a thought here of who you would get if you were Arizona? Is there a name just pops off the top of your head?
I have no clue, actually.
Me neither. It just makes no sense to me. I have no idea.
It's a strange job and a strange place in the program. Like they're still kind of in the balance of like what's going to happen with this roster, because this is either going to be like a really enticing opening of saying like, hey, you know, I could go into the big, like if somebody is thinking, okay, I'm going to use the Big 12 as a stepping stone, maybe I inherit this roster, you know, we compete at the top of the new Big 12 for 2 years, and then I'm out to, you know, the Big 10 or the SEC. But I think a lot comes down to what happens with that roster over this window, where obviously decisions are made and changes can be made. But yeah, I have no clue.
And now more than ever, you have to move fast if you're Arizona, or you're going to lose your roster. Now, they have a little bit of wiggle room because if you're not a grad transfer, you can't enter the portal to the end of the spring right now, into the spring football season. But you got to move. You can't just be waiting around for 2 weeks to make this hire like you could if you did it at the end of the year. This needs to be done this week. So it has to be done swiftly. And who that is, I don't know. Maybe it is just the San Diego State head coach, or whoever you said earlier, Kyle, that's been floated. But it does need to happen fast. And this is a big, big hire. They nailed it with Jed Fish, but their previous couple were not good. You did also say a name on Twitter, Kyle, Rich Rodriguez. He maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to bring him back in the fold. He's been good at Jacksonville State, has kind of proven himself again that he is a good coach in college football. Maybe bring him back.
Yeah, probably not, given the circumstances under which he left the Arizona job. I think there was someone with like the secretary there. I don't remember exactly, so I don't want to say.
I can't ever remember which Rod's. Was it West Virginia to Michigan to Arizona, or was it West Virginia, Arizona, Michigan?
West Virginia, Michigan, okay. Arizona. He almost – so actually funny, full circle, he almost went to Alabama 1 year earlier. His wife didn't like Tuscaloosa, so they said, no, we're going to stay West Virginia, and then they hired a guy named Nick Saban instead. So this whole domino of Kalen DeBoer going to Bama, Jed Fish going to Washington probably doesn't happen if Rich Rod takes that Alabama job. But his wife didn't like Tuscaloosa. Where were we? Oh yeah, I think they'll just hire their offensive coordinator. If I had to pick a favorite,
okay.
I think they'll go chalk there. If you are a Power 5 head coach listening to this and you're changing jobs, you want somebody to review your contract, you're going to need an attorney to look at that document. That's what scared me about the Jed Fish video. They're just showing up to his house with papers and he signed it. Like, who knows what's in that thing? Surely he didn't hire Barnett, Howard, and Williams, but he should have, because Barnett, Howard, and Williams is the best law firm in the state of Texas, located in Fort Worth, but they handle cases all across the Lone Star State. You can check them out. If you want to learn a little bit more about the people at Barnett, Howard, and Williams and their expertise, their knowledge of the issues, go to our YouTube channel, and we have a 20-minute conversation with Luke Williams on the Title IX situation. They specialize in that, in criminal defense, catastrophic injury, you name it, they can do it. bhwlawfirm.com if you want to learn more. My last thought on this is that if we're here in the offseason now and it's time to drink some Kool-Aid, in no particular order, 3 of the front runners for the Big 12 next year are going to be Kansas, Kansas State, and Utah. None of them are on Texas Tech's schedule next year. Arizona was up there as well until this happened. We'll see how much they lose in the portal. If they do hire the offensive coordinator and their quarterback and everybody stays, I could see them still kind of making noise. But let's assume this knocks them down a peg. That's one of your road games next year. That game could become more winnable. And then Colorado, I think, will also be floated up there. You get them at home. Am I crazy for thinking you've got a pretty favorable schedule the way things look right now?
No, I don't think you're crazy. I want to believe, Kyle. I do. I think maybe if we talk about the Dallas Cowboys here in a second, we can talk about expectations and buying in and how that hurts me when I do it as a sports fan. But I'm not ready to buy in like it seems like everyone else is, especially in the Discord and on this podcast with you, Kyle. But I do think your schedule is more favorable than most. I thought you had a pretty favorable schedule this year, and it didn't really turn out that way, losing week 1 to Wyoming. So we'll see. I think you did finish strong in the Big 12. I think you have an expectation set by Joey McGuire that you're going to win Big 12 games. And to avoid Kansas State, who absolutely murders you every year in football, is a good thing, in my opinion, yes.
I don't know if I'm a believer in Oklahoma State, but let's lump them in with the other 5 I just rattled off to round out the top 6. And let's exclude Texas Tech from that for now. Kansas, Kansas State, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, Oklahoma State. 3 of them you don't play. 1 of them you get in Lubbock. So 4 of the top 6 teams you either don't play or you get them at home.
Yeah. Colorado and Lubbock.
Yeah. If Oklahoma State is fraudulent or Arizona just kind of falls off after this coaching change, like you might have one big road game against Oklahoma State and then just you have to hold serve at home to earn your way to the Big 12 championship game. I can live in that world, and I know people are burned from the expectations this year. I don't think I expected to make the Big 12 championship game this past year, and I think we could pull the tape, and I thought we would be better than we were, but I wasn't expecting that. This year, I'm not so sure. I think we're actually underrated, which could be good based on how the sky-high expectations worked out for you this past offseason. But I think we could be a combination of underrated and have a favorable schedule, and I want to live in that world.
Money, what are your thoughts on the schedule? Do you think Texas Tech has a ride to run here?
Well, every morning I wake up, I look in the mirror, and I say, "Go 1-0 today." That's kind of how I live my life. So, gonna take it 1 week at a time. But I do think the way it sets up is nice. I think avoiding Kansas State is obviously huge, especially with the damage they've done the last couple of years. But a lot of changing scenarios, even this deep in the offseason, it's pretty crazy. And I think if you've established your roster and your situation to be competitive, whether that's, top 3 competitive, top 5 competitive, I think you're in the conversation of being a competitive team. And so I think you've done the work at this juncture to, address some issues, process some of your roster pieces, upgrade specific positions. But I still think it comes down to winning week by week, or else you end up with an 0-1 start.
We have a question from Chris here. Do they have exceptions for entering the portal, like losing a head coach? I think the rule is the standard portal dates are tossed out the window. If your head coach leaves, you get 30 days to enter if you have a coaching change. So, yes. So, Arizona players, I guess the clock would start today. They've got 30 days to hit the portal if they want to. One more thing before we move on. I don't know if we want to talk any NFL or anything, but if you missed our midweek episode on the Dave Campbell's Republic of Football feed, that's because it wasn't there. We've moved 1 episode per week to our Patreon channel, patreon.com/gamblinggauchos. It's $5 a month to join. You now get 1 podcast a week, some written content, access to a library of interviews we've conducted in the past, access to some written content, the Discord server, and a portion of all proceeds go to the Matador Club. So we hope you will join us there. We've had several new additions, newcomers this past week when we announced that. If you subscribe to the Patreon and aren't in the Discord yet but would like to be, just message us either on Patreon or Twitter, and we'll get you added. It's a good time, and you get to read Ryan's thoughts right after every Big 12 win, which are quite a treat, if I do say so myself.
I do want to do – now we're going to do the bulk of the mailbag in those midweek episodes, but there are a few pertinent questions in the mailbag I want to get rid of this week on a Sunday before, because they'll be stale by Wednesday or Thursday whenever we record. I do believe Houston is Wednesday, so maybe we do a late night after post game or that Thursday night. We'll have to see. But as far as the Matador Transit mailbag goes, start bench process cut these Cowboys 88s. Drew Pearson, Michael Irvin, Des Bryant, C.D. Lamb. Any thoughts here?
I'll start Irvin, bench Pearson, process Lamb, cut. Who's the last one?
Des.
Oh.
Des, the all-time leader, I believe, in some statistical categories. Drew Pearson finally in the Hall of Fame. Michael Irvin, a Hall of Famer. C.D. Lamb, statistically the best season ever this year for a Dallas Cowboys wide receiver.
Yeah, I'll still cut Dez. Maybe I'm caught in the moment of what modern football is like, but those slow, big body receivers like Dez don't cut it anymore. Yeah. C.D. Lamb is the kind of guy you want in today's game. Yeah. So that's recency bias, but I'll stick to it.
Money, any additional thoughts there?
I think I'll go that order. Maybe flip Dez and CD, but I'm probably just a little sour from earlier.
I would also cut Dez. I big Dez fan, but he's a little bit annoying post-career, I think. Is what it is. Let's see. Let's talk about this before the Houston game because it might not be as pertinent after the Houston game. Do you think now is a good time to start talking to our kids about the possibility of a Texas Tech national championship?
No. I'm really excited at the progress we've made even within one season, and it looks like McCaslin's off to a great start. But not quite yet. If we beat Houston on the road, then yeah, I'll shove the chips in the middle of the table there. But I still think we have some deficiencies. I think we're a tournament team, which is more than I could say before the season started.
So yes, it is too early.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you deep 16, Sweet 16, Elite 8 run on the table here? Money? You think we need?
I still think Sweet 16 is the ceiling. I still think that a couple of wins under your belt is probably still the ceiling. I mean, Mark Adams inherited a gem of a roster, got a good player in Bryson Williams out of the portal, and took that team to the Sweet 16. And we were enraged that he did not win Coach of the Year. Like McCaslin taking a brand new Texas Tech team that has had just a slate of issues the past few seasons to a national championship would quite literally be one of the Big 12 basketball history.
Yeah, it took Scott Drew 8 or 9 years to get there at Baylor. Bill Self took him a while to get to the top of the mountain. It would certainly be one of the craziest things of all time for McCaslin. I know Beard did it in year 3. So that would be crazy. A question primarily for Rob. Does the Rangers win help with tonight's results? Tonight's results being the Dallas Cowboys. No, it doesn't. I separate my baseball fandom with my football fandom. I gave myself a couple of weeks to enjoy that Texas Rangers World Series. Now we're on to the offseason. And I will forever be disappointed with my Dallas Cowboys. I was alive for 3 Super Bowls. That doesn't mean I got to enjoy them. I've watched the 92 and 93 Super Bowls a billion times on VHS. I remember watching the 96 one in person. I do have real memories from that one, or 95, whatever it was. 96, it was the year, but 95 season. But since then, with a cast of characters at head coach, like Chan Gailey and Wade Phillips and Jason Garrett, who I tried to fire for his final 6 seasons as a Dallas Cowboys head coach, to Mike McCarthy being the next head coach. I was never in on Mike McCarthy. He's won 12 games, 3 straight seasons, has 2 NFC East championships, and he's still a bum in my eyes. He's got no culture. He looks like Charlie Weiss on the sideline, minus the snot running down his face. He is a bum. He has no culture. They don't have a will to win. They showed that today. They quit. They won 16 straight at the Dallas Cowboys Jerry World and couldn't get the Packers off the field. Well, Jordan Love was the best quarterback in football for the final 8 weeks. I don't care. He's a rookie, and he torched you. You bums. The Dallas Cowboys didn't employ a linebacker the final 10 weeks of the season. They were playing safeties at linebacker and got cooked in the run over and over. They should have lost to the Lions last week or whenever it was, 2 weeks ago. The Dallas Cowboys should fire Mike McCarthy immediately. They should fire Dan Quinn. He's been looking for other jobs for 2 straight seasons. And they should hire someone who will implement a culture outside of Jerry Jones. The Dallas Cowboys will forever be bums until they fire a head coach with a pulse. Now, people talk to me about Jerry Jones all the time. Now, Jerry Jones, it's Jerry Jones's fault. As long as Jerry Jones is alive, you're going to still be the Dallas Cowboys. I have news for all the people who blame Jerry Jones. This roster is good enough to win in the NFL. If you blame the GM, Jerry Jones, that Jerry Jones should fire the GM, you would love to have this roster if you're anyone else in the NFL besides maybe the 49ers, the Eagles, who have a great roster, the Lions, who have built something. If you're Arizona, if you're the Vikings in the NFC, you want this roster. It's really good. Except for the fact that when the Wolf went down, you didn't replace him in the midseason. You didn't go and make any trades midseason. Aaron Donald, after you beat the Rams, told Jerry Jones, hey, come get me. I'm available. The Rams suck. Now, the Rams are in the playoffs, and you've already been beat. So, no, the Texas Rangers winning did not do anything for me with the Dallas Cowboys. We'll talk about it more, I guess, tomorrow on Overreaction Monday with the Rob Bro Show, but it just, to me, is over and over again, especially against the Green Bay Packers, a moot point here. The Packers own the Cowboys in the playoffs. They own Mike McCarthy since he left Green Bay. And Mike McCarthy won 1 Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers, who's a top 10 quarterback of all time. So, I don't know. Those are a couple of my thoughts there. No, it didn't help.
If anything, it makes it worse in my eyes, because we've just been looking. And I'll preface this by saying I'm like the most casual baseball fan there is. But for the last couple of years, or like really the last decade with the Rangers, it's just been show us a pulse, show us promise. You come into this year, you spend a lot on big arms, you end up having injuries. Your relief pitching is an absolute mess. Marcus Semien disappears in the postseason, and that team played gritty. They played above their talent level. They played above their pay grade, and they found a way to win. With this Cowboys team and with a lot of other teams the last couple of years, it's been live up to the expectations, live up to the things that you're supposed to do. There's no bar that you're supposed to jump over. Just go and do the things that you're supposed to do. And consistently, they not only fail to reach it when it matters most, but they fall on their face in the most embarrassing fashion, allowing the first ever 7 seed to advance in the first round of the playoffs and doing so fully in control. I don't care what that scoreboard said. That was a beatdown, an all-out beatdown. And they did their best to kind of pat the score at the end, but that was a beatdown and an embarrassment.
Some of my earliest memories of watching the game of football, starting to learn the game of football, was in the late 90s, watching with my dad, my grandfather, my uncles. We're all big Dallas Cowboys fans. And there was still Emmitt Smith, Aikman, Irvin, Moose, but they were on the decline. And like at that point, that they would always joke about how many concussions Aikman had. But I believed the marketing materials, especially when you're that young and that impressionable. Like, this is America's team. And they take the roof off the building so that God can watch them play. And they're like, oh, awesome. I live in Texas where the Dallas Cowboys play. And then as I get a little bit older and I keep tuning in, it's like the Chad Hutchinson and the Quincy Carter, and like they stunk. And it was like jarring to me at a young. I was like, I thought we were the Dallas Cowboys and we're America's team. We're God's team. How are we this bad? And that has unfortunately persisted for like 20 years now. Now, they've had some good teams in the regular season. They've, I think, won 12 games in the regular season each of the last 3 years. And I thought they were finally getting over some of the recent names. Like they were stuck with Zeke. They spent a top 5 pick on a running back. They extended him. I thought that was a bad move. I think that's a bad move for any franchise. But they had finally gotten it. It's like we're elite at edge rusher. We're elite at we've got CeeDee Lamb, elite receiver, really good quarterback play, elite corner. And I was like, okay, like they're good at all the right positions. They've always had a good O-line for the last 5 or 10 years. And I went to my very first Cowboys game this year. They played the Giants, who I know they stunk. They were 17-point favorites, but they covered that handily. And it was humming like a well-oiled machine. I thought, okay, this is the year that I think the 49ers are tough, but I was like, I think they'll get to the NFC title game. And, best man wins between them and the Niners. So kind of shocking. And the Packers did have a lot of momentum late in the season. I'm primarily a Vikings fan, not a Cowboys fan. But trust me, I hated that as much as most Cowboys fans because reality set in that the Green Bay Packers, with 3 draft picks over the span of 45 years, are going to have Hall of Fame quarterback play. And I tweeted this on my personal account that the Vikings could have 20 tries at getting 1 Hall of Fame quarterback and wouldn't get it right. That's why we have like 45-year-old Donovan McNabb. It's why we traded a first-round pick for an ACL-less Sam Bradford. It's why we drafted Tavares Jackson in the 2nd round, RIP. And the Packers, like, oh, we'll trade a first for Brett Favre. Boom, 15 years of Hall of Fame production. Oh, we'll groom Aaron Rodgers, spend 1 more pick on him. He's ready to go, 15 years of elite production. And then they draft this kid out of Utah State. I was like, well, I don't know why they took him. I don't think he's going to be any good. And they developed him slowly. We saw him in preseason action or when Rodgers got hurt, and I was like, he's not very good. They finally whiffed on one. They're going to have to suck for a couple years just like everybody else. No. Apparently they have a top 5 quarterback in the NFC, and they're just going to stay elite at that position for probably my entire adult life at this point. So it's maddening. Like I've seen the Vikings trot out Christian Ponder, like some absolute bums at quarterback. They can't get it right.
Yeah.
And the Packers, once every decade and a half, have to try to get a quarterback, and they just nail it every single time. It's infuriating.
It is infuriating, and it's a bunch of no-name receivers like Dobbs and Watson.
Romeo Dobbs, maybe.
Who couldn't get it done with Aaron Rodgers, but apparently Jordan Love, who can throw off his back foot or with no feet on the ground at all, 40 yards down the field on target with nobody there. By the way, Dan Quinn plays man coverage 90% of the year, and in the first 40 plays zone. And he just gets shredded. Look, you play 10 games without a middle linebacker. It happens. You get toasted on the ground. It happens. I am not hanging a divisional banner in this house. We are not hanging that at Jerry World. Only thing that matters in the NFL is playoff wins, and you do not win enough in the playoffs. And again, if you're just waiting for Jerry Jones to die, let me introduce you to Stephen Jones, who has the same money or will when he dies and is an idiot. You're stuck with him. But I still believe in my heart that the Cowboys front office, as middling as they are, is one of the better front offices in the NFL, which is just crazy. They're a top 10 front office in the NFL, and they make more money than anyone else. George says prediction, the Texans will win a Super Bowl before the Cowboys win another. CJ Stroud is a stud. They've got Nico Collins, and when he's healthy again, the kid from Houston, who I just forgot his name, but what's the name?
Tank Dell.
Tank Dell. They also have Devin Singletary, who never did anything in Buffalo and now is like the leading rusher in the NFL over the last 6 weeks. Just unreal. They also have Laramie Tunsil. I think they have a really good roster. Now, if they catch the Chiefs off guard, and if I don't know, the Steelers beat the Bills, then they don't have to play the Ravens in their next matchup. The Texans could sneak to the AFC Championship, and you don't want to play a hot team in the playoffs, but I don't think they can beat the Ravens this year. But if you told me, if I had to pick one, the Texans or the Cowboys, I still think the Cowboys and the NFC have a better path to the Super Bowl than the Texans do. especially when you have to go through Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, who has fell off in the last couple of years, but is still Josh Allen. I don't know. I think, Kyle, I know you think highly of CJ Stroud. I do too. Especially on a rookie deal. If you can build a roster while your quarterback's on a rookie deal, you have a great opportunity. Think of the Seahawks and Russell Wilson. That's how you're good in the NFL. You have to have a young quarterback, a good quarterback, and money. And that's the way to do it. And they got Will Anderson and CJ Stroud in the top 5 picks. That might be the best draft ever if it pans out.
Yeah, you're right, though. All the good quarterbacks are in the AFC. Like, I think Stroud, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, like mostly unproven guys, but in 1 to 3 or 4 years in the league have flashed something serious at the top. If you still buy Burrow when he's healthy, like you've got Burrow, Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. Then in the NFC, it's like Jalen Hurts is getting shoved forward for a few yards every play, and Jordan Love is apparently really good, and Brock Purdy runs Kyle Shanahan's system really well. But you don't see just like these elite arms top to bottom like you do in the AFC. And I don't know, like in the NBA, when the East or the West is top heavy, that usually kind of evens out in free agency, but it seems less fluid in the NFL, especially at the quarterback position. If you have a guy like that, you lock him down long term. So could just be that way for a while. And it kind of was in the AFC with Brady, Manning, and then to a lesser extent Roethlisberger for a decade and a half. And we might just be seeing a new version of that where in the divisional round on the AFC side every year, it's going to be some elite quarterback play, Mahomes, Stroud, if he keeps on this trajectory, plus an Allen, Burrow, Lamar Jackson type guy, maybe even Herbert or Lawrence. And then on the NFC, it's like, I don't know, kind of there for the taking in a lot of ways. If you don't believe that like Dak is at that elite level and you think Jordan Love is trending up that way, I don't know, just fewer elite arms, it seems like, in the NFC right now.
Yeah, and contract-wise, Dak Prescott, you're paying him $30 million base salary next year with a $60 million cap hit. How do you change your team when that's the cap structure of your best player? As opposed to CJ Stroud, who's going to make, I don't know, $5 million next year on a rookie deal with way less of a cap hit. I don't know how you fix this roster. I've heard Bill Belichick's name. I don't know that helps. We talked about on Twitter and in the Discord, Vrabel and Kingsbury taking over.
You want to know what hiring Bill Belichick would be the equivalent of?
What?
Kansas hiring Les Miles 10 years after he peaked.
Yeah.
Okay, and the name, sure, the resume, but what in the last 5 years makes you think Bill Belichick is the answer to, if you've won 36 regular season games in the last 3 years and you're just looking for that little something extra to make you count in the playoffs, what makes you think Bill Belichick at this moment in time is that guy?
I mean, is he going to bring Matt Patricia over as the offensive coordinator like he did 2 years ago? That's the Bill Belichick you're getting right now. You're not getting prime Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels and, hey, second mention on the podcast tonight, Charlie Weiss, who's doing that offense. You're getting Steve Belichick running the defense and Matt Patricia calling plays. That's the kind of Bill Belichick you're getting right now. I don't know. Nick Saban left college football. Does he want a shot at the NFL? I don't know. He's 72. Surely he rides off into the sunset.
The Nick Saban who retired 3 days ago?
That's what I'm saying. Well, he left college football. I don't know that he retired.
He left the door open for a return to the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah. Pete Carroll is available. He's been middling with the Seahawks. What does it change there do?
I really do like Vrabel. I think he's a no-nonsense guy who, might clash with Jerry.
Yeah, you talk about culture.
But in a good way. He'd be like, hey, this BS sells tickets, but I want to win some football games. I know, in a vacuum, his tenure with the Titans wasn't outstanding or anything, but it's the Titans. And, he punched above his weight. He never had an elite quarterback. He got a lot out of Ryan Tannehill for a while there. And, they won some playoff games with Mariota and Tannehill. They had the Chiefs on the ropes in the AFC Championship game, and then Pat Mahomes happened. So I think, like, if you give him some legit personnel, they've been paying a running back, which I think is just – you're always starting at a deficit if you do that in the NFL. Great defensive mind, great culture guy. I think if you pair him with a good offensive coordinator, that'd be a really good hire for the Cowboys.
You could have had Dan Campbell 3 years ago. You went with Mike McCarthy. Is what it is there. Yes, Money Manville talks. He talks all the time. But it just – I don't know where the Cowboys go. And it would not surprise me at all for McCarthy to get another year. It wouldn't. There's another question in the mailbag. Does he make it to breakfast? Yes, he makes it to breakfast. They might fire him tomorrow afternoon. But again, if you're not going after Jim Harbaugh, you don't have to go fast. If you're not going after Mike Vrabel, you don't have to go fast. If you think you're going to get some playoff coach, you have a couple of weeks to do this, especially in the NFL. It's not like college football where you have to go fast. You're not getting players in the transfer portal if you make a decision today or in a week.
I want to lob something out there, and I want Money Mainville's take on it so that Popcorn here, cactus emoji, can hear you talk. It's, I think, pretty unusual for NFL guys to leave a head job for another head job in the NFL. It does happen sometimes. I think something that could grease the skids there is if a head coach knows he has kind of like a bad roster salary cap situation. The Rams went all in on Matthew Stafford, and it paid off. They traded some first-round picks away. They won a Super Bowl. But Matthew Stafford's kind of old. Aaron Donald kind of old. I don't think they have a great cap situation. They don't have young guys coming up because they traded away those draft picks. Sean McVay, I think, still very highly thought of in the coaching industry. Does Jerry try to go get Sean McVay from the Rams?
I wouldn't be opposed. I'm pretty sure their cap situation is absolutely terrible right now. Just got a ton of guys under contract that are very, very old and are costing a lot of money. I think there are some bright spots on that team that, maybe McVay thinks about, like, hey, I've got Puka Nacua now, who looks like he might become one of the best receivers in the NFL. And so I think that's kind of an interesting side of it. But in terms of their cap space, the general age on that team, I think it's an interesting argument. I think, as ironic and as deadbeat as it is, does he want to leave LA for Dallas? I think is the big question. I think right now, sitting in my freezing cold apartment where it's 11 degrees outside, I would very much rather be in Los Angeles. But obviously, when you're associated with the Cowboys, it means something. It means a lot more than, being the head coach of the Rams. That's just the objective reality of the situation. And so if he's thinking, hey, I've done this before, I've won a Super Bowl, I don't feel like my roster is really being optimized right now, but here's a situation where they've got a quarterback who maybe still has some upside. They've got a really strong defense. Can I capitalize more here in the next, however many more years I want to coach than in LA? Maybe.
Just hire Dan Quinn. Simple. Dan Quinn in 2015 with the Atlanta Falcons, 8-8, second in the NFC South. 11-5, went to the Super Bowl. We know what happened there. That was the only time he won the NFC South, who has been bums the entire decade, especially since Drew Brees left. 2017, 10-6, third in that division, lost a playoff game. 7-9, 7-9, 0-5. Some people are just coordinators. We're looking at you, Wade Phillips. Dan Campbell is not a great NFL head coach. To promote him, I think you're in the same wallowing mediocrity. Now, this is something I've said a lot on the radio throughout my time as a sports analyst here. If Jerry Jones is what Jerry Jones thinks he is, why does he not lay that $1 billion wad on the table and go get somebody else's head coach? Why does he not flash the money and say, Sean McVay, I'll pay you double? I'll pay you double to be here. Mike Shanahan, you probably can't get him now. I'll give you $20 million.
Kyle Shanahan or Mike Shanahan?
What'd I say?
You said Mike. Well, I think you could get Mike Shanahan if you wanted to.
No, not 80-year-old Mike Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan. Hey, Jerry Jones, get off your wallet and pay somebody to be the head coach. You got Mike McCarthy out of retirement. Nobody was going after Mike McCarthy. Nobody. And he lied to get there. When he said in his first press conference, I told Jerry I watched every NFL game while I was retired. I was just kidding. From that moment, all right, I knew he was going to be a loser. Now, he won 36 games in the regular season, is what it is. But I'm done with Mike McCarthy. I love the Sean McVay idea. That guy can coach. That guy can coach in the postseason. It's 24-23, and that Lions roster is way better than the Rams roster.
I'm laughing at this tweet from our good friend Mateo Nomeo. It's a screenshot of an ESPN news alert that says the title is Prescott backs McCarthy, and then the blurb is Dak Prescott says if there are questions about Mike McCarthy's job status, quote, then there should be about me as well, end quote. And Mateo Nomeo says, I mean, well, yeah. I think that pretty much sums up where the Cowboys are at right now.
Yeah. Look. Hey, also shout out to Sing Scarlet. Lots of Lady Raider soccer players got in the draft this weekend. If you want to hear more about that, I'm sure the Sing Scarlet ladies will have a full report there. Hannah Anderson, I know, went. I will say this, though. It's frustrating, okay? As a Cowboys fan, I'm frustrated. We're recording this right after the Cowboys lose, so I'm blowing off some steam here. But I can't do another season of Mike McCarthy. I'm going to go all in on the Chiefs. I'll bandwagon the Lions. I'm not going to root for the Cowboys next year if Mike McCarthy's the head coach. A lifetime of pain has led me to this. It's just not worth it. It's not worth it. Looking at that dumb blank stare he has on his face, the guy is just a moron. And he played he beat bad teams this year. Like, it was such a fluke 12-win season. Couldn't win on the road. Dan Campbell went full simple jack at the end of the game and couldn't beat the Cowboys in Dallas. It's just, anyways, Kyle, you raised your hand. What?
I'm also out on the Vikings if they draft. I did not even know this was a conversation, but I saw Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy's names floated as potential first-rounders. If we draft one of those guys in the first round, or really before, like, the fourth or fifth, and even that, I'm not for it. I'm just done, because that is such a high level of incompetence that it is not worth me emotionally investing in the outcome if the people driving the bus are that bad at their jobs. I'll just root for the Chiefs full-time. I'll root for Stroud and the Cowboys because I live here now. But I'm not investing in any team that drafts J.J. McCarthy in the first round. His own team in the national championship game didn't trust him to throw the ball when they had a lead.
Yeah.
Like,
that's what it is. That's what it is. You know what? If the Cowboys keep Mike McCarthy, I'm a Texans fan. I'll say it right now. I'm going to go all in on C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson and their head coach there and D'Amico Ryans and just be all in. I'm all in on the Texans if Mike McCarthy's the head coach in 2 weeks.
The bar has been set so high for a first-round quarterback at this point. If you can't convince me there's a good shot that he turns into Patrick Mahomes, C.J. Stroud, Jordan Love, those types of guys, Josh Allen, then there's no point. And like nothing, absolutely nothing that J.J. McCarthy has ever put on tape would lead you to think he's in the same stratosphere as those guys. If an NFL,
he needed 7 years in college football to be good enough to go to the NFL.
He throws bubble screens.
Yes.
His average depth of target was like last in the country. He did nothing.
Hey, he should go play for Shanahan.
If my team, I mean, if any team does it, they're stupid. But if my team does it, it's not worth the investment. I'm just like, I'm done at that point.
J.J. McCarthy should be Mr. Irrelevant.
That's a joke. He's not as good as Stetson Bennett, and Stetson Bennett was like a sixth rounder.
Well, Stetson had some troubles of his own that didn't allow him to stay around.
Sure, but still.
Yeah.
Like, I have not scouted any FCS players. I could find a quarterback from the FCS ranks that has a better shot at being an NFL starter than J.J. McCarthy.
All right, 5 minutes left in this game. The Rams have the ball. It's 24-23. I would love to go watch the end of that one. Any final thoughts here? Oh, Hannah Anderson, Alex Kerr, and Madison White all drafted.
Final thoughts. I'll go quick. Our 5'11.5" point guard Joe Toussaint will rip the ball away from your big man. He will get on the floor to take the ball. Our catch and shoot 3-point guy, Chance McMillan, will not only take the ball from your best player, he will pick him up and make him waddle like a penguin while he rips the ball away from him. Darion Williams, our undersized stretch 4, will rebound what turns into be a game-winning bucket between 2 Kansas State players while one of them has him armbarred and will finish the and one. And then we'll yell, "And effing one!" in your face because we are tougher than you. We might not win every game. We're not as deep as every team. We're not as talented as every team. The shooting is going to come and go, but we are tougher than you. Get used to it. It's not going to be fun playing Texas Tech basketball as long as Grant McCasland is here. Oh, and the guy who plays the fewest amount of minutes for us will rebound the ball between 2 of your bigs, even though he was 30 feet away from the bucket when the shot went up. And then he'll finish an amazing layup that gets us back in the game. We will do that to you.
Yeah, and I don't want this to be the narrative. I really don't. But somebody commented earlier, it's not every man a Wildcat, it's every man a whiner after a loss. And we just don't want that for our Wildcats.
We're not just going to do it to the Wildcats. We're going to do it to everybody.
Right. But I don't want the narrative of every man a whiner to be something that goes forward from this. I want to bury that and move it on and just think about Texas Tech basketball. Money, any final thoughts there?
Yeah, big, I think, culture win over Kansas State. I think you did a lot of the things that you're starting to want to do, and you're going to have to do exactly that doubled on Wednesday. Houston, one of the best defenses in the country. They rebound every single missed shot. It feels like you're going to have to play 40 minutes of your toughest, most disciplined basketball. And Houston, and its 2 losses, has lost by all accounts because they've run into a defense that has slowed them down. Can Texas Tech do that on Wednesday? I think that's still a question I have that's unanswered about this team. I think against Kansas State, I think they caused some problems, but that's a team that cannot take care of the basketball. Can they generate turnovers? Can they force bad shots against an offense that's a little bit more efficient against like a Houston team? And can they ultimately, overcome what looks like a disadvantage on the defensive end? I think it's a huge, huge, huge opportunity for this team. Even just, if it is a loss, to look back and say, okay, what led us to this loss? But a big opportunity to kind of lean into the culture and the identity that Grant McCasland is really starting to instill here.
All right. Toughest team wins. And again, just to reiterate, I don't want this moving forward to be every man a whiner, but we'll have to see what plays out. Texas Tech, Houston this Wednesday night. We'll see you again on this podcast feed next Sunday night as we stream on YouTube. You can follow us there, youtube.com/@GamblingGauchos. Again, you can follow us at patreon.com/GamblingGauchos as well. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that. You can follow Money Mainville at Ryan Mainville too. How about that? So some titillating thoughts on the board there. All right, that's all I got.
Love y'all.